My name is James Shepard, and today we are going to be talking about understanding statements. Okay, now let me go over the four kinds of cost structures very quickly. We talked about this already, and again, I'm going to show you actual statements for these different cost structures. Matt Price and I are going to go through them. Number one is tier pricing. There are three different kinds of tier pricing. There is 3-tier, 4-tier, and 6-tier pricing. Let me explain very briefly these three, and then we'll get into some statements where we can actually show this to you. 3-tier pricing is where they take all of the transactions that a merchant processes and they split them into three different buckets or three different rates. Okay? You have a qualified rate. Now, the qualified rate on a 3-tier priced merchant, the qualified rate would include any check cards or credit cards that were swiped through the terminal, and they have a signed receipt, and it's not a rewards card or a corporate card. It's just a standard credit card or a standard check card that's swiped through the terminal. That would be your qualified transactions. Then you're also going to have mid-qualified. Now, your mid-qualified transactions are normally going to be your phone sales. You know, somebody calls in over the phone and orders pizza over the phone, and the merchant types it in on their terminal. That's going to be mid-qualified. Some rewards cards are going to be mid-qualified usually. Then you also have your non-qualified bucket. Your non-qualified would be the highest rate, and that would be for your corporate rewards cards, where you're getting cash back. That would also be for some Moto transactions, mail order, telephone order transactions. But mostly that's going to be for your corporate rewards cards. Have you ever seen the commercials for, get this credit card and you get 2% cash back? And you wonder, well, who pays that 2%? The merchant does. And so that's what a non-qualified card would be. Now on 4-tier, you have your same qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified. The only difference is that the check cards have their own qualified rate. So the qualified rate is split. The main difference to remember here is that the difference between 3-tier and 4-tier is that 4-tier splits the qualified rate between check cards and credit cards. Now, what is 6-tier pricing? Well, let me go back to 4-tier pricing for just a second. On 4-tier pricing, you have one mid-qualified rate and one non-qualified rate that applies to check cards and credit cards that are mid or non-qualified. Now, it is very unusual to have a non-qualified check card, but it does happen. Matt and I were just talking about a few situations, and he'll mention that later. But on 4-tier pricing, doesn't matter if it's a check card or a credit card, even though on 4-tier pricing the qualified rate is split with two different rates, one for check cards, one for credit cards. On 4-tier pricing, the mid-qualified and non-qualified rate is the same for check cards and credit cards. On 6-tier pricing, it's different. So on 6-tier pricing, you have 3 buckets for check cards, and you have 3 buckets for credit cards. So in other words, there's a qualified, a mid-qualified, and a non-qualified rate for check cards, and there is a qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified rate for credit cards. Okay, very different. Now, usually the surcharge rate would be the same, but so that's tier pricing. Next, we have Interchange Plus. Interchange Plus is much more transparent. It's usually best for large volume merchants. Now let me give you a general rule here, and then I'm going to explain Interchange Plus in a second when I get to the first statement. But let me just give you a kind of a hard and fast rule. Number one, no matter what cost structure a merchant is on, if they do under $20,000 in volume, I advise that you keep them on the same cost structure if possible. It just makes it a lot easier to make the pitch. In other words, if they're already on tier pricing and they're doing $12,000, $13,000 in volume, your best bet to get that sale in most cases is to leave them on tier pricing. Our tier pricing rates after the Durbin Amendment are very low, so you can usually offer significant savings, and it just makes it a lot easier to pitch to the merchant, hey, your qualified rate was 2.09, I'm going to take it down to 1.59 or whatever. It makes it easier rather than having to say, hey, I switched your whole cost structure around, you're now on Interchange Plus. It can be a lot more difficult to pitch. Now, some agents that have a very, very good understanding, I'm thinking of Mitch Moses, who's going to be doing a webinar for us in a couple weeks, probably one of our most knowledgeable agents in this area. He is able to do these conversions and uses that as part of his pitch. But for newer agents, or if you're trying to kind of get a grasp, just leave them on the cost structure that they're on as a general rule. Okay, now, what about Interchange Plus pricing? Well, If a merchant does $10,000 or less in volume, they're probably best on tier pricing. As far as for the merchant, I'm talking about now, for the merchant. They're going to get more savings on tier pricing than they are on Interchange Plus if they're doing $10,000 or less in volume per month. If they're doing $10,000 to $20,000 in volume per month, they may or may not be better off with Interchange Plus. There won't be a huge difference, but it could be cheaper for them to be on Interchange Plus pricing. If they're doing $20,000 or more in volume, then I would always switch them to Interchange Plus if they're not already on it, because the savings for the merchant will be significantly higher as a general rule on Interchange Plus than it would be on tier pricing. Okay, so that's kind of some general rules if you want to take some notes. Now also, I meant to say this at the beginning, get out a calculator, because as we go through, we're going to ask you some questions on the statement, so you're going to want to have a calculator and a notepad to take some notes. So I'm going to repeat this again real quick so you can write it down. If a merchant does $10,000 or less in volume, they're probably best on tier pricing as far as the savings go. If they do $10,000 to $20,000, they might be a little bit better on Interchange Plus, but it's not going to be a huge difference. If they're doing $20,000 or more in volume per month, they are almost always going to be better off on Interchange Plus pricing. And again, we'll explain more about Interchange Plus pricing in a moment. Now, flat rate pricing, we're going to show you several statements of flat rate pricing today. However, we do not offer flat rate pricing because it's deceptive and it's a problem. Now, the reason it's deceptive, and you'll see on the statements, is that an agent will go in and say, hey, I'm going to give you a flat rate of 2% or a flat rate of 1.89%. Well, for instance, one that I did this morning, he was on flat rate pricing at 1.89%, but if you took his effective rate or the total of all of his revenue that he paid in fees, he paid 3.52%. So it's like, well, wait a second. I thought I was at 1.89% flat rate. Well, yeah, but what they do is they give you 1.89% flat rate, but that's really like your qualified rate. And then what they do is they just add a bunch of surcharges on. And so it's really flat rate pricing plus surcharges. So when a merchant says, oh, you can't beat my rate, I'm on flat rate pricing at 1.89%, you can usually know that you'll beat that by a long ways, because that's not really what they're paying overall. That's just the rate that the sales agent kept drilling into their head to get them to switch. Lastly, you have subscription rate or high monthly fees type of plans. These are becoming more and more popular, but now with the Durbin Amendment, they kind of went back a little bit, and so now they're not as popular, but there are quite a few people out there with them. You'll notice these because it would seem that they have an unbeatable rate until you get to their monthly fees. When you get to their monthly fees, you'll see that they have like a monthly fee of $49.95. What they've done is subscription rate pricing supposedly takes just the interchange fees and passes them through, and then they just add on $49.95 of profit. So that way the merchant always knows how much the profit is. Now, in reality, most subscription rates that I've seen also do charge some surcharges, and it's usually a terrible deal for the merchant. There's also other things you'll see, high monthly fees. A good example of this would be, you get a statement and it looks like, good night, this person is at like a ridiculously low rate, until you find out that they're paying a rental on their terminal of $100 a month or something like that. So there are a lot of these different strategies where a processor will come in, show them a cost analysis that shows them $200 a month in savings, but then they charge them $250 in monthly fees from all kinds of different, other types of monthly fees, subscription rates, leases, whatever that might be. So that's another way that people will do your different cost structures.